Phantom.
I didn't mean to stop in Grayridge. No one ever means to stop in a place like that. You don't plan it. You don't circle it on a map. You don't tell anyone you're going there. You just end up there. I'd been driving for 11 straight hours, headed west on Route 91, chasing a job I didn't really want anymore. Night had settled in thick and heavy, the kind of rural darkness that eats headlights whole. No radio signal, no cell service, just asphalt unspooling endlessly in front of me like a black ribbon. That's when I saw the sign. Grayridge, 3 miles, last exit before morning. I remember laughing when I read that, a tired, hollow sound. Dramatic, I muttered to myself. But my gaslight was on, and my eyes were burning, and I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. So I took the exit. The ramp curved downward, tighter than it should have been. The guardrails rusted and bent inward like they were leaning to watch me pass. Trees crowded close on both sides, tall, leafless, their branches tangled together above the road like interlocked fingers. The deeper I drove, the quieter it got. No crickets, no wind, no distant engines, just the hum of my tires and my own breathing. Then, without warning, the trees opened up. And there it was, Grayridge. The town sat in a shallow valley, stretched along a single main road. Every building looked old, not historic, just tired. Wooden storefronts with peeling paint, a diner, a hardware store, a church with a crooked steeple. Houses lined up behind them, identical porches, identical fences. And every single window was lit. Every one. Warm yellow light glowed from homes, shops, even buildings that should have been closed. No flickering, no shadows crossing the curtains, just steady, watchful illumination. It felt like the town was awake, waiting. I slowed to a crawl. There were no people on the sidewalks, no cars parked along the road, no movement at all. Yet the lights stayed on, all of them. I remember thinking how expensive that must be. I remember thinking that something was wrong. I passed a sign nailed to a telephone pole near the town limits. Welcome to Grayridge. Population 1102. Beneath it, someone had carved a second message by hand. Please don't sleep in your car. I didn't know why that made my stomach tighten, but it did.
The gas station was at the far end of town, its neon sign buzzing faintly. Open 24 hours, it claimed. I pulled in, tires crunching on gravel that hadn't been disturbed in a long time. The pump worked. That should have reassured me. It didn't. The numbers clicked upward far too smoothly, like the machine was eager to be used. When I finished, I went inside. A bell rang as I pushed the door open. The place smelled like dust and old coffee. Behind the counter stood a man in a faded uniform, maybe mid-50s, gray hair neatly combed. He was smiling when I walked in. He never stopped. "Evening," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. "You're cutting it close." "Close to what?" I asked. He tilted his head like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. "Morning," he replied. I paid in cash. He counted it twice, slow and deliberate, then slid the change back to me, arranging the bills so they were perfectly aligned. "You passing through?" he asked. "Yes," I said, immediately. His smile twitched. "Everyone is," he said. I grabbed a coffee from the warmer. It was still hot, fresh. That bothered me more than it should have. As I turned to leave, I noticed a bulletin board near the door. Flyers were pinned to it, yellowed and curling at the edges. "Town meeting, every night, attendance required. Curfew begins at 11 p.m. Do not turn off your lights." The last one was written in thick red marker, underlined. "What happens if you do?" I asked. The man behind the counter didn't answer. When I looked back at him, his smile was gone. And for the first time since I'd arrived in Grayridge, I felt like I'd said something I wasn't supposed to. Outside, the town seemed closer somehow. The buildings leaned inward. The road felt narrower, the lights brighter. I got back in my car and locked the doors. I checked the clock. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until curfew. That's when I saw someone standing in the middle of the road ahead. A woman. She was facing away from me, perfectly still, wearing an old-fashioned dress that brushed the pavement. Her hair hung straight down her back. She didn't move when I honked. She didn't move when I rolled closer. Only when my headlights washed over her did she turn her head, just enough for me to see one eye in the rearview mirror reflection. It was wide, unblinking, and terrified. I slammed on the brakes. When I looked again, she was gone. No footsteps, no shadows, no sound. Just the lights. Always the lights. I didn't know it yet, but I had already missed my chance to leave. Grayridge doesn't like goodbyes, and it doesn't forgive witnesses.
I stayed in the car longer than I should have. Hands on the steering wheel, engine idling, eyes fixed on the empty road where the woman had been. I kept waiting for something to move. Nothing did. The lights from the houses pressed in on me from both sides, steady and unblinking, like the town itself was holding its breath. I'd never felt so visible in my life, like if I opened my door, something would immediately know. I checked the clock again. 11:56 p.m. 4 minutes until curfew. I didn't know what curfew meant here. I didn't want to find out. I put the car in drive. The road out of Grayridge should have been straight. I remembered that clearly. One main road in, one main road out. That's how towns like this work. But when I reached the edge of town, the road curved. I followed it. It curved again, and again. Houses continued on either side, identical porches, identical windows, identical lights glowing like cloned stars. I passed the same diner twice, same cracked window, same daily special sign frozen in place. My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I accelerated. The speedometer climbed. The town didn't blur. Everything stayed perfectly sharp, like I wasn't actually moving. Then the clock ticked over. 11 o'clock. Every light in Grayridge changed at once. Not off, dimmer. The warm yellow glow drained into something colder, paler, almost white. Shadows deepened. The air outside my windshield shimmered like heat rising off asphalt, but the night was cold, very cold. And then I heard it, a sound I felt more than heard, a low hum. It vibrated through the steering wheel, the seat, my teeth, like 1,000 distant power lines singing in unison. The town had gone into curfew. That's when the people appeared. They didn't come running out of houses. They didn't step off porches. They were just there, standing under streetlights, at corners, in doorways. Men, women, children, all perfectly still, all facing the road, facing me. I slammed the brakes. My headlights washed over them. They didn't react. No blinking, no flinching, no expressions. Just eyes. Hundreds of eyes reflecting back at me, watching. I rolled down my window an inch. "Hey," I called out, my voice shaking. "I'm lost. I just need directions out of town." No one answered. The hum deepened. Then, as one, every head tilted to the same angle. I rolled the window back up. My hands were slick with sweat now. I wiped them on my jeans, glanced at the rear-view mirror, and froze. The back seat wasn't empty anymore. A boy sat there, maybe 8 years old, pale, thin, wearing clothes that looked decades out of date.
He was buckled in. I hadn't heard a door open. I hadn't heard anything at all. "Don't stop," he said quietly. His voice sounded wrong, too old, like it didn't belong to him. My throat closed. "How did you—" "They don't like it when you stop," he continued, staring straight ahead. "They think it means you're staying." "I'm not staying," I said quickly. "I'm leaving." The boy finally turned to look at me. His eyes were cloudy, like frosted glass. "No one leaves after curfew," he said. I floored the accelerator. The engine roared. The car lurched forward. The people lining the street began to move. Not walking, sliding. Their feet didn't lift from the ground. They just drifted forward, arms hanging limp, eyes locked on me, mouths opening in perfect unison. The hum became a chant, not words, a rhythm. The boy grabbed my arm. "Don't turn the lights off," he hissed. "I wasn't planning on it." "They'll ask you to," he said. "They always ask." "Who are you?" I shouted. His grip tightened, ice cold. "I didn't listen. That's why I'm still here." The road ahead dipped sharply. My headlights illuminated a shape rising out of the asphalt. The church. I hadn't driven anywhere near the center of town, yet there it was. Its doors stood open, spilling that pale light onto the street. Inside, I could see rows of pews, and every one of them was filled. The people from outside were sliding toward it now, funneling inward like they were being pulled by gravity. The chanting grew louder, clearer. They were saying the same thing over and over. "Stay awake." The car stalled.
The engine died with a final cough. The headlights flickered. "No," I whispered. The boy's nails dug into my skin. "Don't let them go out," he pleaded. I turned the key. Nothing. Again. Nothing. The headlights dimmed further. Footsteps approached. Real footsteps this time. I looked up. The gas station clerk stood in front of the car, smiling. "You missed the meeting," he said gently. Hands struck the windows, dozens of them, faces pressed close, skin stretched tight, eyes glowing faintly in the curfew light. The chant stopped. The silence was worse. "You look tired," the clerk said. "We can help with that." He reached for the hood latch. The headlights went out. Darkness swallowed the world. I woke up screaming. I was lying on a narrow bed in a small room. A single lamp glowed on a nightstand beside me. The light was warm, normal. My heart pounded. A dream, I thought, just a nightmare. Then I noticed the sign above the door, handwritten, underlined, "Do not turn off the light." From somewhere beyond the walls, the hum began again, and someone knocked.
The knock came again, soft, polite. 3 slow taps against the door. I didn't answer. I lay there on the narrow bed, staring at the lamp like my life depended on it, because somehow, deep in my bones, I knew it did. The bulb hummed faintly, the same frequency I'd heard outside during curfew, like the town's heartbeat had followed me indoors. The sign above the door seemed darker now. "Do not turn off the light." I swallowed and sat up. "Who is it?" I called. Silence. Then a voice, calm and familiar. "You should attend the meeting." The gas station clerk. "I don't belong here," I said. My throat was raw, my tongue thick. "There's been a mistake." "There always is," he replied pleasantly. "That's how it starts." The door handle turned. It wasn't locked. I hadn't locked it. The door swung open slowly, revealing a narrow hallway washed in the same pale curfew light I'd seen outside. The clerk stood there, hands folded behind his back, uniform spotless. Behind him, the hallway stretched farther than it should have, lined with identical doors. Every door had a lamp glowing inside. Every door had the same sign. "I don't remember checking in," I said. "You didn't," he said. "You arrived." He stepped aside, gesturing for me to follow. I hesitated. "What happens if I don't go to the meeting?" His smile didn't fade. "You'll fall asleep." That did it. Fear does strange things to your priorities. In that moment, I would have followed him anywhere if it meant staying awake. I grabbed my jacket, my phone still dead, and stepped into the hallway. The door behind me closed on its own. I didn't hear a latch. We walked. The hallway curved gently like the road had, and after a while I realized we were no longer inside a building. The walls peeled away into open air, and suddenly we were walking down the main street of Grayridge. It was still curfew. The lights were still pale. But now the people were moving normally.
talking quietly, walking in pairs, smiling at each other. They smiled at me too. Too long, too wide. The church loomed ahead, its doors open, light pouring out like a promise. The hum grew louder with every step, syncing with my pulse until I couldn't tell which one was real. Inside, the pews were full. The boy from my back seat sat in the front row. He didn't look at me. The clerk guided me to an empty spot near the aisle. "Sit," he said. I did. The moment I sat down, the doors slammed shut. The hum stopped. Silence flooded the church. Then someone stood at the altar. It wasn't a priest. It was a woman. Tall, thin, dressed in black that seemed to absorb the light around her. Her face was ageless, smooth and lined at the same time, like she existed in multiple years at once. When she spoke, her voice filled the room without effort. "Welcome," she said. "We're glad you made it before morning." Every head turned toward me. I felt heat rush to my face. "I don't want to be here," I said, my voice echoing too loudly. She smiled. No one does, at first. She began to walk down the aisle. Each step echoed longer than it should have. "This town," she said, "was built on a promise." She stopped beside me. We would stay awake. Her eyes met mine. "And in return," she whispered, "the night would never take us." Images flickered across the walls of the church like shadows cast by unseen flames. I saw Grayridge decades ago, people wiring lamps into every room, every barn, every street, generators roaring through the night, families huddled together, eyes red, hands shaking, refusing sleep. "What happens if you fall asleep?" I asked. The boy answered this time. "They forget you," he said softly. The noun nodded. "You stop being solid." A murmur rippled through the congregation. I felt it then. The exhaustion. Not normal tiredness. This was bone deep, soul heavy, like I hadn't slept in weeks. My thoughts dragged, my vision blurred. The lamplight overhead flickered. I jolted upright. The clerk appeared beside me instantly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Careful," he murmured. That was close. The woman raised her hand. "We will now share," she said. One by one, people stood. They told their stories. A trucker who pulled off the road for coffee. A family whose car broke down. A woman who followed her GPS into town by mistake. Each story ended the same way. I got tired. When it was my turn, I couldn't speak. The room tilted. The lights dimmed. The boy turned and looked at me, fear breaking through his blank expression. "Please," he mouthed. I forced my eyes open. "My name is—" I started. I stopped. I couldn't remember it. Panic surged. I dug into my pocket, pulling out my wallet. My driver's license stared back at me. The photo looked wrong. The eyes were dull, the name blurred. "You're fading," the woman said gently. "That's all right. We'll help you stay." She leaned close. "All you have to do," she whispered, "is agree to the light." The congregation stood as one. They began to hum, the same hum, louder, stronger. The lights flared painfully bright. I screamed. Something shattered. Darkness rushed in like water, and for one blissful second, I slept. I woke on the church floor, gasping. The lights were back. So was the hum, but the pews were empty. The boy was gone. The woman was gone. Only the clerk remained. He helped me to my feet. "You'll need stronger lights now," he said. "Sleep comes faster after the first time." I looked down at my hands. They were slightly translucent. Outside, the town lights burned brighter than ever. And somewhere deep beneath Grayridge, something shifted. Aware of me now. Hungry. They gave me a new lamp the next morning. Morning, if that word still meant anything in Grayridge. The sky never truly brightened here. It just shifted from black to a dull, overcast gray, like the world itself was too tired to wake up fully. The town lights stayed on. They always stayed on. Even when the sun tried to rise, it felt like an afterthought. The clerk brought the lamp to my room. It was heavier than it looked, industrial. The bulb inside glowed with a harsh white intensity that made my eyes water. A thick cord trailed behind it, ending in a plug that didn't match any outlet I'd ever seen. "You'll need this now," he said, setting it on the nightstand beside my bed. "The others won't be enough." I stared at it. "What happens if it burns out?" His smile returned. "It won't." They don't let you keep track of time in Grayridge. No clocks, no watches, no working phones. Time becomes something you feel instead of measure. Measured in blinks you fight not to take, in yawns you swallow, in the way your thoughts start to smear together like wet ink. They teach you the rules quickly. Rule 1, never turn off your light. Rule 2, never sleep alone. Rule 3, if you hear breathing that isn't yours, increase the brightness. I asked what happened if you broke a rule. No one answered directly. They never do. The people who were in the meeting with me lived differently than I expected. They didn't lie down. They didn't rest. They leaned against walls, against counters, against each other. Their homes were filled with lamps, dozens of them, clipped to shelves, hanging from ceilings, bolted to walls. The air buzzed constantly. The hum had become part of the town's soundscape, like wind or insects elsewhere. Some residents wore sunglasses indoors. Others had wrapped their eyes in gauze, thin enough to let the light bleed through. "You get used to it," a woman told me as we passed on the street. Her eyes were bloodshot, the veins spider-webbed and permanent. Or you stop needing to. That second part terrified me more. I started to notice the changes in myself on what I guessed was the third day. My shadow lagged behind me, not by much, just a fraction of a second too slow. At first, I thought it was my imagination, sleep deprivation playing tricks on me. But once you see something like that, really see it, you can't unsee it. I'd turn a corner. My shadow would hesitate, then catch up. They paired me with a man named Howard. Everyone gets paired eventually. Howard had been in Grayridge a long time. How long, he couldn't say. His hair was white, but his face looked stretched, like it didn't quite fit his skull anymore. His eyes reflected light oddly, like animal eyes caught in headlights. "We'll take turns," he said, settling into a chair across from me. "Watching." "Watching what?" I asked. He smiled weakly. "You." That night, or something like it, I nearly lost myself. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, staring into the lamp's glow, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me like a physical force. My thoughts slowed, my breathing deepened. The light dimmed, just a little. "Hey," Howard snapped, clapping his hands, eyes open. I blinked hard. I wasn't asleep. "You were going to be," he said. I looked down at my hands. They were more transparent than before. "Why does it want sleep?" I asked. Howard didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Because sleep is where we go when we're not guarded, and it's very, very hungry." I felt cold. "What is it?" His mouth opened. Then the lights flickered. Howard recoiled as if struck. "Don't ask that out loud," he whispered. "It hears questions." I began to see things in the corners of my vision, movement without shape, darkness folding in on itself. Sometimes, when my eyes drifted shut for a fraction of a second, I'd see a vast space, endless and deep, with something coiled inside it, waiting for awareness like a fisherman waits for a tug on the line. Every time, I jolted awake screaming. The lights flared brighter, the hum deepened. Satisfied. People disappear in Grayridge. Not suddenly, gradually. First, they stop coming to meetings. Then their houses go dark, just one room at a time. No one mentions it. The next day, someone else is paired. Howard showed me an empty house once. Inside, lamps lay smashed on the floor. The walls were streaked with something dark, like shadows burned into the paint. In the bedroom, the bed was untouched. No struggle, just absence. "They fell asleep," Howard said simply. I tried to remember my life before Grayridge, my job, my friends, my name. The memories felt distant, like stories I'd heard rather than things I'd lived. The longer I stayed awake, the more my past unraveled. Identity, it turns out, requires rest. Without sleep, you start to come apart. On what I think was the fifth night, the town lights surged, brighter than ever. The hum became a roar. People poured into the streets, shielding their eyes, shouting. "What's happening?" I yelled. Howard's face drained of what little color it had. "It's feeding," he said.
The sky above Grayridge darkened, folding inward like a closing eye, and in that darkness something massive shifted, aware, alert, and very pleased.
They didn't let me rest. Not after the meeting. Not even for a moment. The clerk walked me back through the streets of Grayridge as if nothing had happened, as if the church hadn't been full minutes earlier, as if I hadn't watched my own hands start to fade like fog in sunlight. The town was louder now, not voices, machines, generators, everywhere. I heard them behind walls, beneath sidewalks, humming under the soil itself. Grayridge wasn't just lit, it was powered, sustained by an endless mechanical effort to push back the dark. "You'll learn the rules quickly," the clerk said as we walked. "Those who don't last." Why me? Why anyone? He stopped walking. For the first time, he looked tired. Because sleep is a door, and something on the other side learned how to knock. They brought me to a house near the edge of town. It looked like all the others. White paint, front porch, lights blazing in every room. Inside, it was brighter than a hospital. Lamps, overhead bulbs, floodlights in corners. No shadows. 3 people already lived there. They looked human. That's the best compliment I can give them. Martha had been awake for 6 years. Caleb for 4. Jonah didn't remember. Their eyes were bloodshot, their movements slightly delayed, like their bodies were always catching up with their thoughts. They explained the rules. Rule 1, never sleep, not even for seconds. Rule 2, never turn off a light. Rule 3, if you hear knocking after midnight, do not answer. Rule 4, if someone tells you it's safe to rest, they're lying. Rule 5 came last. If you start forgetting things, Martha said softly, write them down immediately. She handed me a notebook already half filled with shaky handwriting. Names, dates, memories, some crossed out. I asked about the boy. Jonah stiffened. Children fall asleep faster. They don't mean to, they just can't fight it. What happens to them? Caleb turned away. They stay, but not like us. By the second night, I understood what they meant. Sleep hunts you. It doesn't come gently here. It stalks. It waits for moments of weakness, blinks that last too long, breaths that slow too much. I felt it circling me constantly. My thoughts repeated, time stretched, light burned, and sometimes I heard breathing that wasn't mine. On the 3rd night, the knocking started. Not at the door, at the walls. Soft at first, curious. Martha shut off the generator, powering the backroom lights just for a second, forcing the creature away. The darkness screamed. I swear it did. By the end of the week, my reflection lagged behind me. By the end of the 2nd, my shadow pointed the wrong way. By the end of the 3rd, I couldn't remember my mother's face. Grayridge was eating me, slowly, methodically. And the worst part, I was starting to understand why they stayed. By the 4th week, I stopped counting days.
Time doesn't work properly when you never sleep. It stretches into a single endless moment, punctuated only by fear and light. I learned the town's secret then, not from the clerk, from the people who no longer blinked. They walked the streets during curfew. No generators followed them, no lamps. They didn't need light anymore. Their eyes reflected nothing. Jonah was the first I saw change. He stopped writing in the notebook, said it was pointless, said the memories would only hurt once they were gone. He stood for hours staring at a single bulb, not moving, not blinking. One night he turned to me and smiled. "I don't feel tired anymore," he said. That was when his shadow disappeared. The clerk explained later. "Some people cross a threshold," he said. "They give up fighting sleep. They let it take what it wants. And then the town keeps what's left." I saw what sleep really was that night. Not rest, not dreams, a presence. It pooled in dark corners, slid beneath doors, pressed against eyelids from the inside. When Jonah finally closed his eyes, the lights in the house exploded, and something stood up inside him. He still walks Grayridge. He still smiles, but he's not Jonah anymore. He's a lantern. I started hearing my name whispered in the hum. I don't know if it was real. I don't know if it still is. My hands fade more every day. My voice echoes when I speak. And the thing beneath the town, it's learning me. They say there's a way out, a real one, but it only opens when the lights finally fail. And no one in Grayridge has ever been brave enough or desperate enough to try.
By the 6th day, or what I thought was the 6th day, I stopped trusting the clocks. They still existed. Every building in Grayridge had at least one, but none of them agreed. Some ticked forward too fast. Others barely moved at all. A few ran backward when you weren't looking. The only thing consistent was the light. Brighter now, hotter, unforgiving. Sleep was no longer a threat, it was a weapon. I hadn't closed my eyes in what felt like weeks. The first night after the meeting, I tried, just for a second, just to rest them. I was sitting on the edge of the bed in my assigned room, lamp blazing beside me, sign screaming its warning from the wall. Do not turn off the light. I counted backward from 100. At 73, the hum changed pitch. At 56, the shadows thickened. At 41, something breathed behind me. I never reached 0. They gave me pills after that. Not sleeping pills, the opposite. Small white tablets handed to me by the clerk, always smiling, always watching to make sure I swallowed. "Helps you stay sharp," he said. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped them. "What happens if I don't take them?" I asked. He leaned closer. "You'll dream," he whispered. Dreaming, I learned, was worse than sleep. Sleep meant disappearance. Dreaming meant attention. People began to change, not all at once,
gradually, like rot setting into wood. I saw it first in the eyes. They stopped blinking as often, then not at all. Red veins spread across the whites, branching like cracks in ice. Pupils stayed dilated, drinking in the light no matter how bright it got. Then came the smiles. Not happiness, acceptance. "You get used to it," a woman told me as we stood beneath a street lamp that buzzed like an angry insect. Her name might have been Carol, or maybe that's what she used to be called. "I don't think I can," I replied. She laughed softly. "That's what everyone says before they understand what's really here." "What's really here?" I asked. She looked up, not at the sky, at the light itself. Dinner. That night, I saw it. Not fully, just enough. Curfew came earlier now. The town adjusted as more people weakened. By the time the hum began, my skull felt hollow, like it had been scooped out and replaced with static. The streetlights brightened, then bent, not physically, perspectively. They leaned inward, stretching impossibly tall, their glow pouring downward like liquid. The air thickened, pressing against my chest. People froze mid-step, mid-breath, mid-blink, and the dark between the lights moved. It peeled itself out of the shadows. Not a creature, not a shape, a lack, like someone had cut a hole in reality and forgotten to patch it. Where it passed, the light dimmed, not disappeared, but weakened, like it was being sipped through a straw. I couldn't look directly at it. My eyes slid away every time I tried, but I felt it, cold.
Curious, hungry. The woman in black stood at the center of the street, arms raised. "Feed," she said softly. The thing reacted. The hum deepened into a vibration so strong my teeth chattered. And then someone screamed. A man collapsed near the diner. He'd been awake too long. I recognized him, a teacher, I think, or a salesman, someone who still asked questions. His lamp had burned out earlier that day. They'd told him it would be replaced. It wasn't. The thing flowed toward him, not quickly, patiently. The streetlight above him flickered. The man tried to crawl, tried to scream again. The sound cut off halfway, not abruptly, absorbed. I watched his shadow lift off the ground, peel upward, stretch, then snap back into the dark like it had been reeled in. The body didn't disappear. It stayed, empty, breathing, eyes open. Gone. I vomited. No one noticed. No one ever notices during feeding. The woman lowered her arms. The dark receded. The lights brightened again. Too bright, burning, satisfied. Later, I found the boy, or what was left of him. He sat in the church basement, surrounded by lamps stacked 3 high, wires running everywhere, buzzing violently. His skin was translucent now, veins glowing faintly beneath it like dying embers. "You slept," he said. His voice echoed wrong. "I didn't mean to," I whispered. "That's how it knows you," he replied. "That's how it learns your shape." I crouched in front of him. "What is it?" He thought for a long time. "Imagine," he said slowly, "being awake forever and starving." The realization hit me so hard I almost laughed. Grayridge wasn't cursed, it was bait. The thing beneath the town couldn't enter the light, so the people built more of it, brighter, stronger. They stayed awake so it could feed without crossing over completely, drinking exhaustion, fear, dreams that never finished forming. Sleep was the bridge, and I had already stepped onto it. That night, as I lay staring at the ceiling, lamp blazing like a miniature sun, I felt something settle just beneath my thoughts, waiting, learning, practicing my name. I don't know how many nights I have left, but I know one thing now. The lights don't keep it away. They make sure it knows exactly where to find us.
By the 7th day, or what I believed was the 7th day, I stopped trusting the idea of time. Clocks still existed in Grayridge. They hung on walls, stood on nightstands, blinked red numbers from ovens and dashboards, but they never agreed with one another. One would say 3:14 a.m., another 6:02 p.m. The church bell rang every hour, but the sound never matched the position of the sun, if the sky outside could even be called a sky anymore. The light never changed. It never dimmed into evening or softened into morning. It stayed fixed in that same unnatural, bleached brightness, as if the town were trapped inside a single, unending second. And so were we. Sleep had become a memory. Not rest, sleep. The deep, dropping kind. The kind where you forget you're a body. I couldn't remember what it felt like anymore. I only remembered the moment before it happens, the way your thoughts loosen, how the world blurs at the edges. That moment had become the enemy, the thing we hunted down and killed inside ourselves again and again, every time it tried to rise. They taught me how. The clerk, whose name I still didn't know, whose smile never reached his eyes, brought me to a house on the east side of town. It was small, one story, every room flooded with light. There were no curtains, no shades, just bare windows staring out at other bare windows. "This is where you'll stay," he said, "for now." Inside, 3 people sat at a kitchen table. They looked up when I entered. All of them smiled. One was a woman with trembling hands, tapping her fingers against a mug of coffee she wasn't drinking. Another was a man scratching lines into the wooden table with a key, over and over, carving the same shape until the surface splintered. The third was different. He didn't move at all. He sat perfectly upright, hands folded in his lap, eyes wide open, unblinking. I stared too long. The clerk cleared his throat softly. "Don't do that," he warned. "What do?" I asked. "Look at him like he's gone." The man's eyes shifted toward me, slowly. They focused, and I felt it again, that pressure behind my own eyes, like something was gently pressing from the inside, testing the strength of the walls. "Hi," the man said. His voice was steady, calm, almost pleasant. "I'm still here." They called people like him anchors. Those who had stayed awake so long, pushed themselves so far past exhaustion that something inside them had hardened. They didn't blink, they didn't yawn, they didn't sway or nod, they didn't sleep. Ever. But they don't dream either, the trembling woman whispered to me when the anchor wasn't looking. "That's the price." "What does that mean?" I asked. She shook her head, eyes glossy. "I don't remember my mother's face anymore."
They showed me the methods. Caffeine was just the beginning. Electric shocks, small ones, delivered through metal bands on the wrist whenever brain activity dipped too low. Bright rooms, louder than silence, humming with machinery and overlapping voices. Pain, that worked best. A pin driven beneath the fingernail, a needle pressed into muscle, cold water poured over the head without warning. Anything to keep the mind clawing upward. "Why don't you just leave?" I asked one night, if it was night, while pacing the house, my shadow sharp and unmoving on the wall. The man with the key laughed, a broken, barking sound. "Leave to where?" he said. "You think it's only here?" I stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" He looked up at the ceiling, at the lights buzzing overhead. It learned how to spread. I didn't ask what it was. I already knew. The first time I saw one of the blinkers was by accident. I'd wandered too far from the house, my thoughts slipping, my vision tunneling. The light ahead of me dimmed just a fraction, enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. I followed it, down a side street I hadn't noticed before, into shadow. They stood there in the dark, dozens of them, people who had failed. Their eyes were closed, not asleep, empty. They swayed gently like bodies underwater, faces slack, mouths slightly open. The light around them was wrong, bent inward as if afraid to touch them. One of them twitched, then blinked. The moment his eyelids opened, something moved behind them. Not eyes, depth, like I was staring through a hole. I ran. Behind me, I heard footsteps, not chasing, not hurried, but patient, confident, like whatever followed knew I couldn't keep this up forever. I burst back into the lighted street, collapsing to my knees as the hum surged louder, protective and punishing all at once. When I looked back, the shadows were empty. They punished me for that. Not harshly, not cruelly. They sat me in a chair beneath industrial lamps and made me listen. Voices layered over voices, stories told by people who had fallen asleep just a second, just a breath, just a blink. "I dreamed of my house," one voice said. "I dreamed of water," said another. "I dreamed I was forgiven." Each dream ended the same way, with screaming. The clerk leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "It doesn't like when you remember the dark," he murmured. "Why?" I rasped. "Because it reminds you there's an alternative." Later, much later, I noticed something else. The anchors cast weaker shadows, not gone, just thin, like pencil lines compared to the rest of us. They were being hollowed out, used. That's when I understood the true purpose of the meetings. They weren't about community, they were about selection, choosing who would be kept awake long enough to become permanent.
I caught my reflection in a window and didn't recognize it. My eyes were bloodshot, veins spiderwebbing across the whites. My face looked stretched, unfamiliar, like someone else wearing it loosely. I blinked once. Pain exploded behind my eyes instantly, white-hot and punishing. I screamed. The hum surged, satisfied. That night, the boy came back, not physically, in my head. "You're running out of room," he said. "I know," I whispered. "When you stop dreaming, it finishes digesting you. What happens then?" A pause. "You become light." I didn't know whether that was metaphor or threat. Outside, the town glowed brighter than ever before. Inside, something ancient and sleepless watched through every bulb, every wire, every trembling filament, waiting for the moment my eyes finally failed me, and knowing with perfect certainty that moment was coming.
By the 8th day without real sleep, time stopped behaving like time. It folded. Moments stacked on top of each other until I couldn't tell if something had happened 10 minutes ago or 10 years ago. The clocks in Grayridge no longer mattered. Every one of them showed a slightly different hour anyway, but my body kept count. My body always knew. My hands shook constantly now, not from fear, from being awake too long. They had moved me out of the bedroom after what they called my first lapse. I lived in a light room now. That's what the clerk called it. A single concrete chamber beneath the town, walls painted white, ceiling low enough that I could touch it if I stood on my toes. No windows, no corners dark enough for shadows to collect. Just lamps. So many lamps. They hung from the ceiling. They were bolted to the walls. They stood on the floor like silent sentries, all humming in slightly different tones that merged into a constant, skull-vibrating chord. I was never alone in the room, but I was never with anyone either. The others drifted in and out, residents, caretakers, people who had forgotten their own names so long ago they didn't even miss them. Some of them had skin like wax. Some of them had eyes that reflected light even when turned away from it. A few of them cast shadows that didn't quite match their movements. They never stayed long. They didn't like being close to me anymore. I was noticeable now. "You're thinning," the clerk told me during one of his visits. He crouched in front of me, his face illuminated from below by a lamp bolted into the floor. It made his smile look carved. "Like paper left in the sun," he added. I laughed. It came out wrong. "Then why don't you let me sleep?" I asked. He shook his head. "Because it's noticed you." I didn't ask what it was. I already knew. You can feel it before you see it. That's the truth no one ever writes down. The thing beneath Grayridge, the thing the lights were built to hold back, didn't announce itself. It didn't roar or shake the ground or burst through walls.
It pressed, a pressure behind the eyes, a heaviness in the chest, a sense that something vast had leaned closer to listen. And every time I blinked too slowly, the lights flickered. On what I think was the 9th night, the humming stopped, all at once. The silence was so sudden it hurt. I gasped and looked up. Every lamp in the room was still on, but they were no longer humming. The light felt wrong, flatter, like a photograph of brightness instead of the real thing. I knew, without being told, that something had changed. The woman in black came for me then. She didn't open a door. She simply stepped out of the light. One moment the room was empty. The next, she was there.
"You're very close," she said. Her voice was different now, strained, as if she were speaking through water. "To what?" I whispered. She looked past me, down, being seen. She told me the truth. Not all of it, but enough. Grayridge wasn't a town. It was a scar. Something had come through here once, long before generators, long before electric light. Something that fed on the part of the mind that lets go. Sleep, dreaming, unconsciousness. When the first people realized what was happening, they tried to flee. Most didn't make it past the tree line. The rest learned. "It cannot take you while you are aware," the woman said. "But awareness decays." She gestured to my hands. "You are proof." "What happens when it finally sees me?" I asked. Her lips pressed thin. "Then you will belong to it," she said, "and Grayridge will be safe for another generation." That's when I understood. I wasn't a victim. I was a replacement. The lights began to dim, not flicker, but sink, like they were being gently pushed down from above. The pressure increased. I felt something vast roll beneath the town, like a sleeper turning in its sleep. I screamed, not out loud, inside my head. Shapes formed in the light, not shadows, absences. Great curved hollows where light bent away, outlining something enormous just below perception. I couldn't see it directly, but my mind filled in the gaps, and that was worse. Too many angles, too many directions, something that did not have a front. The clerk stood at the edge of the room now. So did the others, watching, waiting. "You said the lights protect us," I rasped. "They delay," he corrected. The woman stepped closer. "You fell asleep once," she said softly. "That opened you." The pressure spiked. I felt fingers, not physical ones, curling around my thoughts. Memory slid loose. My mother's face, my first job, the sound of my own name, gone. I don't know how long I screamed. I don't know how long I stayed awake. But I know this. When the lights flared one final time, blinding and absolute, something beneath Grayridge recoiled. Not in pain, in recognition. The woman staggered. The clerk dropped to one knee. The pressure withdrew, just a little. "Enough.
"You're not meant to be consumed yet," the woman whispered, almost surprised. She looked afraid. "For the first time," she said, "it knows you are looking back." The lights surged brighter than ever. Above us, the town glowed like a beacon, and far below, something enormous shifted its attention toward me.
I didn't leave the church that night. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe fear, maybe something else entirely. The town has a way of making you feel that your body belongs somewhere it shouldn't, and your mind obeys without asking questions. The clerk stayed with me. He didn't speak much, just guided me to a small room in the church's back wing, the kind of room that looked normal until you noticed the shadows didn't behave like shadows should. They flickered independently, stretching longer than the objects that cast them, curling at impossible angles, and sometimes, if I stared long enough, they moved on their own. I slept for a few minutes, or maybe hours, or maybe seconds. Time doesn't exist in Grayridge the way it does elsewhere. When I woke, the pale hum of the town was louder, vibrating under the floorboards and in the walls, a reminder that the curfew never truly ends. The clerk knocked once, quietly. "Breakfast," he said. His smile was tired now. Not the cheerful, patient kind, but something older, frayed, older than the town itself. I followed him out into the main street. The town was awake, but empty. All the lights were on as usual, casting that same strange, almost sterile glow. The hum vibrated through the soles of my shoes. I noticed it then. Small movements, just at the edges of vision. Shadows that seemed not quite attached to the people. A woman walking by had a shadow that lingered an extra second behind her, and when I blinked, it was closer than it should have been. I felt it before I understood it. Someone or something was walking just behind the lights. We entered a diner. The smell of old coffee and fried eggs made me nauseous, though I hadn't eaten in hours. The booths were all empty, except for one, a man sitting with his back to the wall, staring at the wall. I could see his shadow stretching up the wall, twisting like smoke. The clerk guided me to a booth. I sat, hands shaking, and he slid a plate of eggs and toast in front of me. I wasn't hungry. I didn't eat. I just stared. "You'll need strength," he said softly. "Tonight will be difficult." I looked at him. Difficult? How? His eyes didn't meet mine. "The shadows are restless." I thought I understood. I thought I'd seen it all. The people, the lights, the curfew. But this was something else entirely. The man at the wall began humming. Low, almost imperceptible at first, but the hum grew, resonating with the town, syncing with the walls, the windows, even the flickering of the lamps. Shadows around him began to twist violently, spiraling toward him and away from him at the same time. It wasn't natural. It shouldn't have been possible. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. The clerk's hand was on my shoulder. "They feed on sleep," he whispered.
Not just bodies, not just minds. They feed on the spaces you leave when you forget yourself. I had no idea what that meant until I walked back outside. The street was quiet again, lights steady. The people walked as if nothing had happened, but the shadows, they lingered, detached, moving through walls, slipping beneath doors. They paused when I looked directly at them, and then they began following me. Every shadow, every corner of Grayridge, every lamppost along the street, it all moved with intent now. I started to run. The town has no end or no beginning. Every turn led me past the same houses, the same porches, the same glowing windows. I couldn't escape. I realized then that the boy in the car had been right. The town doesn't want you to leave. I tried to call out to the clerk, tried to run back to the church. The streets twisted, reshaped themselves. The hum became a roar. And then I saw it. A figure, not fully human, not fully shadow, but both, standing in the middle of the street, blocking my path. It was tall, impossibly tall, black as smoke, with eyes that shone like lamps. When it moved, the light itself bent around it. When it whispered, because it did whisper, in every voice I'd ever known, it said, "You're ours." I screamed and ran blindly. Shadows lashed at my ankles. A hand brushed my shoulder, solid, then gone. I stumbled into a house. The door slammed behind me. Inside, I found a room full of lights, hundreds of small bulbs, all glowing. They buzzed and hummed, almost violently. And here, for the first time, I felt safety. The shadows stopped at the threshold. The clerk appeared in the doorway. "You can stay here," he said, "but you must keep the lights on. Never let them die." I nodded, too terrified to speak, and I understood then the cruel reality of Grayridge. The town doesn't just demand that you stay awake. It demands that you keep the light alive. Or else, the shadows will take more than sleep. They will take you.